Okay, first of all, I want to mention David Amit, who excavated the main site that I will present today. David was my mentor and friend until he passed on 2030. We started to work on a book on the Hellenistic farms from Mazor, and now it is my duty to finish it. The building of a new city at the foothills of Samaria during the beginning of the 90s was the cause of a few dozen salvage excavations done mostly by the Israel Antiquities Authority. On this map, I located the Hellenistic farms that we excavated at the city. The largest and the most interesting farm is located at area S123. The other three farms are much smaller, and maybe they were inhabited by serfs of the master of the main farm. This is an aerial picture of the farm, and this is the plan. As you can see, there are few wings at the farm. The farmstead, the owner house, is a square building in the corner of a big courtyard surrounded by buildings. A water pool was quarried at its western side, and an olive press was noticed at one of the rooms. Most of the long and narrow rooms were storerooms, as we will see later at Donald and Gerald's lecture. At the northwest corner of the complex, a corner of another room with stucco was found. It was probably a big hall that was the only remain of the southern part of the square complex. The farm established at the end of the 3rd century BCE, and it was inhabited by a wealthy pagan family. A thick layer of oily ash with a lot of imported pottery sherds were found in all the storerooms. After restoration of the pottery collected at the field, we found out that we uncovered about 200 storage jars. Among them are 66 stamped amphora handles that Donald will lecture about their dates. The jars were imported to Mazor from around the Mediterranean Sea, as Gerald will show us later. In one of the rooms, we found a unique find that lightening the wealthy family life.
A group of silverware that recognized by Sylvia Rosenberg from the Israel Museum as a ceremonial drinking set that was given as a marriage present to a young couple. It was dated by her to the 2nd century BCE. Another few silver bracelets and rings were found also at the farm. After the occupation of the farm and the burn of the storerooms by the Hasmonean, they rebuilt and fortified only the farmstead. We found very few stone vessels and some coins from the Hasmonean period. All of them were found in the main building of the owner. This is another farm, a small one, excavated by myself about 5 years later. As you can see, it's not well done. I mean, it's there are three wings over here, but what we found at that field was a very poor preservation material. As you can see, there are loom weights a few agricultural material, and few lamps or knives or things like that. But we didn't find even one amphora handle at that farm. If we're looking at that important map, you can see over here that according to my PhD, we have a lot of settlements, rural settlements in the area between Lod and Tagai, the two main cities at the area. Some of them were inhabited in the beginning with pagan inhabitants and were burned by the Hasmoneans. And later on, we have new settlements that were built by the Hasmoneans. Some of the sites were built much later, also by the Hasmoneans, but they're not located on the main, on the same spot that where the pagans lived. So if we look at the historical process as we understand it, according to the archaeological finds, so you can see that in during the Hasmonean period, Jonathan, Simon, and then Yochanan Holkinus, we can figure out slowly but surely how things were done according to the archaeological finds. That's it.
Wow. Okay, Yechiel, תודה. Maybe, maybe some people have a few questions before we turn next to, and I don't know whether Donald or Gerald will, what order Donald or Gerald will go, but, what just happened?
Presentation, please.
Donald, you want to go straight to your presentation?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Should be back up.
Do you folks hear me? Does Brian hear me?
We hear you,
Yep.
and we're about to load your presentation.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I get the right one.
It should be the
second
cover
one.
some introductory material. I'm going to be discussing both the stamped Rhodian amphora handles from the site and the coins from the site. So it's a lot of material. I'm going to do it very quickly, just by giving you the highlights. To start with the stamped amphora handles.
Okay, wait a second, Donald.
66
Donald.
amphora handles were found at the site.
Donald?
That's quite a large number. Considering the size of the site, just mentioned not far, Tiraki Hudana with 4, I think, or 6 handles. We're talking a large unexpected number. And they were found in the context of the first half of the 2nd century BC for the most part, and that's what I'll be discussing.
Is he a presenter?
They are spread in different places on the site, but 11 amphoras were considered to have been connected. In other words, restorable in 4 different places.
That's the wrong one.
Oh, not the Gerald one.
You've put up in a PowerPoint Gerald's talk and not mine.
Right, we're fixing it. We're fixing it.
This is Gerald and Donald speaking, and Donald wanted to talk about
We're working on it.
Okay. In any event, if there are 11 amphoras that are whole, that means we're talking about 22 amphora handles. The other handles that were found are important. Most of them fall in the same time period as the 11 amphoras that I'll be talking about. And then there are a pair of amphoras handles.
It says Donald
Mazor
Mazor.
handles.
Yeah, I just uploaded it.
One separate
Why did that one?
context. And, I would prefer to describe them as you can see them.
We're working on it, Donald, sorry, apologies.
Okay, I'm good. I can more,
We have it, we're working on it.
Just then maybe a couple of words of background for those of you unfamiliar with stamped amphors and amphor research. Of course, the ideal is to find both handles in the amphora. So two handles. In the case of the Rhodians, one handle was endorsed by the man who was in charge of the pottery workshop, what we call fabricant, and the other handle has the name of the eponym, who is the high priest of Helios in the island of Rhodes. So I'm going to be mentioning the words fabricant and eponym. The two sides of the same vessel, and in only two cases did we find intact amphors, and the others, the other 9, are reconstructed on the basis of a variety of different criteria. Okay, am I supposed to advance the slides by myself?
I think so, I think you can.
There's only 7 of them. Can I just ask that Brian do it for me?
Sure, just tell me when.
Okay, the next slide. Okay. We're starting with, well, for all of our efforts, Brian, the Greek did not come through this time. We're starting with the 2 earliest handles of the 66.
That's what Adobe does to it.
In the columbarium, which is off of the plan that the Epheal had shown you, but it's still in the area of the building that he described. It's area S6, and these are unconnected stamped amphors. In other words, they don't belong to each other, and we don't know the pair, the other handle. We don't have them in this piece of excavation. But you see the dates there. These are the earliest amphor handles, and that gives you a sense that perhaps the earliest occupation, at least in the columbarium, could be around 210 BC, but it could also be later, because these amphors stay in use after the wine presumably was removed, and then they're reused for all kinds of storage purposes, including water. It doesn't have to be something very special, but so these 2 amphora handles give us a sense of the beginning of the occupation at Mazor. Next slide, please. Okay, now I mentioned there were 11 amphoras. They're here on the map. This is the map that Epheal had shown you. The lower left is the service building that he showed you, and then he also mentioned the manor or the owner's residence, which is labeled S1. All of these amphors were found in the service area. That makes sense. And I've shown you them in different colors. Start with the purple, which is from 39, I believe it is. And you see the dates of those amphor handles. The lower left is the yellow, another 2 amphors with their dates. The green, the middle lower area has 3 amphors, and then the last group in light blue have 4 amphors. One thing to pay attention to is that they're not all over the place. They're in specific rooms which we're likely to have been storage rooms, and that each of the groups are separated in date. The yellow, lower left, are the earliest amphors that are whole, found at the site. We mentioned the 2 handles that were found already earlier, but they're the earliest amphors, and they are close in date, closer to each other than any other of the whole amphors. And for 184 and then 174 BCE. The next group is the blue, where you see amphors that date between, let's say, 171 and 162. Just to the left of that, in another very small room, another 3 amphors with roughly the same dates. but a little bit later. And then finally, the emperors, the latest emperors, I'm talking emperor handles now, the latest emperors from 159, and the latest one, 150 to 147, brings us into the beginning of the second half of the 2nd century BC. Just to point out again, there are no emperor handles and no emperors found in area S1, the manor house or the homestead. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, so not only here we got the Greek back, but we've lost all of the numbers. I apologize that that was.
It's not your fault. It's our fault.
Yes.
No.
We did check it a few times before the last presentation. I guess that it had to do with the fire that took place there.
Donald, did you send this earlier in a PDF?
No.
No, but I checked that you could read it all, and you sent me back PDFs that showed that they were.
Donald, I'm sorry. It's correct on my computer. It's incorrect on the presentation computer.
Okay, it's really not so important. If you go back to the former slide, you'll see that the colors are matching, and so it's the same information. I just wanted you to see that the yellow, purple, green, and light blue. And those are the same dates on the slide. Let's go forward again. And what this does have, which I will read you a little bit, give you a sense of it, as I have it here in hard copy, is that I had a column here which described the nature of the connection between the two handles, which gave us the fact that they were emperors. And I should here thank Cheryl Finkelstein for doing most of the work in making those connections. We took the broken emperor handles of two pairs and found that even though they were broken, the rims connected, which gave us a whole connection. Another one was connected by the nature of the device, the design on the handle, and then there were others connected by the color, in other words, the color of the fabric, but the color fabric in situations where we know that the emperors were found in the same room and that they belong to exactly the same time frame. So it was quite easy and quite successful, and thank you again, Cheryl, for helping me with that. Let's go forward, please. Okay, boy. Okay, this is the last slide of the emperors, I believe. And here we see the two intact emperors. They came from Unit 36, where they happen also to be the oldest emperors, the more recent emperors from 150 to 147 BC and 159 to 54 BC. So it makes sense that you would find intact emperors in the latest phase of the service complex. Although we have them all living together, all four rooms, they seem to have been delivered at different times, and that once they were delivered to whichever storeroom they were brought to, they did not move around. It's really astonishing that we find not only that they are all from this, each room has a different date and they're separated by some 8 to 10 years apart, and one's a little bit less, but that also in the same room you have the same identical pairs of stamps. So you can almost reconstruct that the emperors not only were they sent together on a boat from Rhodes to some port on the coast, but that the delivery continued to be integral and uniform, and that every delivery, or most of them, would have the same emperors from the same workshop at the same time with the same stamps being delivered to the same room. There's a gap every time these things happen. In other words, between every delivery, there's a bunch of years, and that those emperors did not move. We don't know why that happened, but it really is remarkable, and I wanted to point it out because when the discussion begins, we can also speculate, and others already have what's the nature of the service room? The person who owned the house on the nearby, what was he doing? Was he marketing these? Was he just importing them 10 years apart? And how come the emperors didn't move around? Let's go forward. Okay. So I'm already summarizing the amphors. The area S2, the service area, had 4 distinct deposits of amphors, which served probably originally for the wine that they brought. Maybe not. Maybe the wine was already drunk in Jaffa, in the port where these things might have arrived. They stayed in their places for as much as another 50 years, which means that they were being probably used for something else. I just mentioned water, but they were used for liquid storage. The wine wasn't kept in the vessel for the 50 years of the earliest group. I'm sure that wine was drunk soon after it was delivered. Okay, each group is separated by some 5 to 10 years, and the roughly datable unstamped fragments of the other classes of the amphors that are found on the site, which Gerald will speak about, do not conflict with these dates. My conclusion is 4 chronologically distinct deliveries. We have to keep moving on, so let's try the next slide. Here's a graph, simple graph showing in red the production quantities over time in the island of Rhodes. Gerald was the first to put these graphs together, and that's his start, and my contribution is the blue line, which shows the quantities of amphor handles in the different periods at Mazor. You see that they're more or less the same, except that Mazor ends earlier. Next. Okay, we're moving to the coins. Unlike the stamped amphor handles and the amphors, there's no significant dating context of the coins. I don't have exact number here, but it's a few hundred coins have been found in this site and the other sites at Mazor. I think the number here is around 100. The Seleucid coins are predominant in all of these sites. Most of the coins were minted in Akop Ptolemais, and that's probably due to the high relative output of that mint. In the period we're talking about, the first half of the 2nd century, that mint provided most of the coins for the archaeological sites excavated south of there, all the way to the northern Negev. Most of the coins that we find in that period of time are from Akko. So I'm not just proposing that there's any more meaningfulness to the fact that they come from Akko. One of the latest coins of this site is one from the Mint of Gaza. It's a bronze of Alexander Balas, and it also accords with the what I said before about the end of the amphor handles in the service center. That coin has a date of 150 to 145, and we said sometime in the 40s there was some disruption at Mazor. Next. Okay, well, again, some of the writing is missing, but I'll fill you in. I was showing here some of the silver hoards found. Some of the coins from the silver hoard found in Mazor. There were 5 found in all in the service center. 4 out of 5 are very close to date, and then the 5th one is a little bit earlier. Their date, the 4 to 5 are between 170 and 165 BC. Okay, so we're smack in the middle of all of this activity. Somebody left here at Mazor about 4 or probably 5 silver tetradrachms of the Ptolemies. The people who know about coins can see these are not Seleucid coins, they're Ptolemaic coins. And in fact, the Ptolemaic coins, even though the Seleucids were ruling in the first half of the 2nd century,
I was wondering who it was, yeah. Thank you.
the southern Levant, the Ptolemaic coins were those who were in circulation until a few years after this time period, around 147, I believe. Ptolemaic coins are the ones circulating, and then,
Is it showing up?
Ptolemaic
No,
coins are replaced by the Seleucid coins. That doesn't relate necessarily to what we're talking here. The appearance of Ptolemaic silver in excavations in this area are more common than perhaps one would expect, and two of them were actually found in the same locus in the same basket. And these are the two at the bottom of the screen. Next slide.
That's interesting.
Okay. So we have to talk about the end of,
Is it
end
images?
of the service building and the end of the manor house. The latest stent emperor handle is here. It appears in the upper right. It's a little hard to read. And it's an emperor handle naming Poluaratos, a fabricant. And this Poluaratos was active, according to one scholar, and I ascribe to that date 124 to 122, and between that range and 110 BC. Gerald, who first examined it, thought that that was also true, and he has done subsequent research, and he's come to the conclusion that that emperor handle was active just after 146 BC. In other words, that the emperor handle, in his opinion, belongs to the group of all the others. However, this emperor handle was found in the farmstead, in the house, and that house underwent changes after the 140s. Even Peel mentioned that. So it's entirely possible that his date could work, because you can always have an emperor handle later than living later than the context. But if I'm correct, then the emperor handle fits very well into the second phase after the disruption of the site, which by a number of other indications points to something in the last quarter of the second century BC. Next.
Next. Can you?
I think this is it, so I'm going to explain, there's one more summary slide. I'm going to explain what is going on here. Not only do we have Seleucid coins that are described in the latest one, being the Alexander Bellis 150 to 145, we also have Hasmonean coins at the site. And they happen to be Hasmonean coins that are early. Most of the Hasmonean coins that we find in excavations include the later coins of Janaeus, which I don't interpret, they're not here, but to find find one site that has absolutely none suggests that the site went out of use before the end of Alexander Janaeus' rule. So what do we have? The early Hasmonean 6 coins of Hyrcanus the First, 129 to 105. 3 of the Janaeus of an earlier type, apparently, and then there are unclear Hasmonean rulers. We don't know whose there are. Let's go to the summary slide. Okay. To summarize the dating, there are 2 standard emperor handles with their earliest dates at the end of the 3rd century, found in the Columbarium. Then there was an arrival of groups of emperors to the main area. They were stored in the service area in the early 2nd century. Further shipments continued all the way to the very beginning of the second half of the 2nd century. There was a disruption, as evidenced by the emperor handles, for sure, the destruction that was evidenced, but also the coins end with Alexander Bellis until the Hasmonean coins arrive or appear, and so that there's a break there. There was possibly a resettlement only at the farmstead with a fortification, and that's understood both from the one stand emperor handle and from the coins. And this possible resettlement may also have an ethnic component, the emperor's end, and that's something I can't go into fully, but the emperor's end, and that might be an indication that these people are Jewish, and of course the appearance of the Hasmonean coins. Now, the last thing is that we said that the latest Janaeus coins are missing, and there's evidence for the historical that's below the dotted line. The first historical parallel, and archaeological evidence, is the site of Yazoo, not far. from Mazor, which describes how Gezer was taken over by Shimon, and John Hooker was put in charge there. And that's in the 140s. That is a parallel to the disruption that we're finding in Mazor. Another closer parallel is a reference to a place called Adita, which is exactly in the middle of all of this area. I was at Adita 10 days ago, and unfortunately, Vital is not Hellenistic, but there are Hellenistic possibilities to identify Hellenistic Adita very close by. And in that case, they also describe how Shimon fortified Adita. Yafil mentioned that, and that also dates to around 140s. So we have the disruption sometime in the 140s, and then the last historical reference is to Adita. Again, the same site is described in Josephus as the place where Jannaeus was defeated when Aretas III invaded the country. That also connects to what people may know as the Jannaeus line. Jannaeus built a defense line which extended out to this part of the country, and regardless of the work he did to defend the country, at Jannaeus he was defeated, and so that puts us in the area of 86 to 84 BC, which could be the end of the Hasmonean presence at the site. Am I done with the last slide? Is this it?
Yeah, that's the last slide.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And quickly, and there's a lot of material, but we want to hear Gerald first. Am I right?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic. All right, Gerald, are you ready?
Is there audio on?
Hold on, Gerald. Don't start talking, because we can't hear you. You need to have your audio on. And is he a presenter?
I just made a presenter.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I hear myself also in your room. So I will start to show you the variety of types of amphoras that were found in Mazor. As you can see, this is all what we found, and as you can see, the minimum number of vessels is 183. I must say that we have very few complete amphoras, almost none. Sometimes the whole body, but most of the time we have the top or the bottom of the amphoras. As you can see in the types, on the top, the yellow and the turquoise are just foot types and ring types which are seen for the first time. So I have no idea how the whole amphora looks like, simply because the destruction or the looting of the stones of the building, and of course that were removed from the field inside the rooms, explain that why we have so few body shards. But in any event, you can see that we really have big variety. I'll be very quick on that. At the bottom, Rhodian, as you can see. Coin types, and you can see how many we have. And I say coin types because they may not all come from Kos, which is logical because if you count, generally speaking, in the Hellenistic period, the Rhodian and the non-stem fragments and stem fragments of Rhodian and coin, you can see that the coins are generally second to the Rhodian. This is not the case in Mazor. That has to be understood. And then you have the Nicandros group, which is from Ephesus, and that is quite well represented here.
In Maréchal we have also a few, but not as much as in Mazor. Then Pamphylian, which are usually very poor, and then what we call the Russell 24 predecessor, which are also from the western coast of Asia Minor. Then Greco-Italic, late one, that's we have only one. Brindisi, we have, I think, 3 or 4, which is not bad, but compared to Maréchal, which continues later, this is not a lot. Then a group which was actually the topic of only this time of the whole conference in Sevilla, what we call the Republican ovoids, because they came from the West, almost all of them. I mean, North Africa and of course Spain and a few from Italy. And these are also quite well represented. Then you have one Ptolemaic amphora, which is very surprising. We have 3 altogether in the whole excavation of Israel. This one is almost complete. And then the variants of the Dressel one, which is something you find also in Maréchal, and that's okay, but it's quite well represented. And then, as I said, the unidentified toes and rings, and I was hoping to have a few answers from the Sevilla, one second. Okay. From the conference in Sevilla, but I couldn't attend, so only my poster were there, and I didn't get serious feedback, so there is still work to do on them. And I put Chios in the last one because I think we have 2 fragments, and they will be early. Next slide, please. So here, more quickly, because we cannot detail here, I made the histogram for wine amphoras, and as you can see, the Cohen are very important, and also the Rhodion, but the Dressel one, which actually I forgot to say this, comes from Western Mediterranean and Italy, but I must say that we have very different fabrics, which should be meaningful, but we have to find some either scholar or student who is doing a PhD on the Western amphoras found in the Levant, because that would be really useful. Of course, somebody who would be connected to both ends of the Mediterranean. So this is for the wine. Next one, please. This is oil, and as you can see, the Republican ovoids are very well represented, and western coast of Asia Minor also, and Nicholas group also goes to the same group, except that this specific one is better located in Ephesus than the other Russell 24 predecessors. Next one. Now we get to the contribution of the Rhodian amphoras, and for the time being only the eponyms, because these are the ones which are best dated, although the dating is not final. And as you can see, of course, this is a comparison between Kadesh, Mazor, and Ika, and I must say that thanks to Uzi Libner, who asked me to check what was going on in Tel Keisan, I must say that we have the same picture. And this enlarges the territory which is concerned by our topic, because of course with Mazor we are way to the south. And I don't want to get to conclusions, but it seems quite a large area for an invasion by the Maccabees. I just closed the suggestion. So, as you can see, they start more or less all quite early in the 80s of the century BC, and they are spread during until 165. The next one, please. Then you have a grouping, because almost all the years are represented between 164 and 100, more or less 144, between 146 and 144. And interestingly, except for Mazor, which ends a little bit earlier, it seems, with the finds we have for this period. I must add that besides Kedesh and El Ika, which have Timonikos as the eponym found there, I must say that in Tel Keisan, and I will send you the column of Tel Keisan, we have exactly the same picture. So, last word for the general problem of the Rhodian amphoras, which has a bearing on our problem. As you can see in purple, you have pi delta, which is for Panama Zeteros, which is an intercalary month, which I didn't take into account in my works, simply because at the time, nobody knew exactly what was the rhythm of this month. Now, Nathan Badou wrote a very thick book, and part of it is on the chronology of roads in general, and it took several magistrates, including, of course, the priest of Helios, who was the most important of them in Rhodes. And he offered the reason that you can see on the second column from the left, and he came to this regular succession of years in which you add an extra month, which is Panamos Zeteros, so it means the second Panamos, as we have Natal 1 and Natal 2, and in the Jewish calendar. The problem is that if my groups are based on physical aspects and also certain contexts, and which are very, very well-known ones, like Corinth and Carthago and Samaria, all the ends of these sites. And the problem, if I try to put in each group those who are known with this month on the stamp to their allocation, we end up very quickly, when we start at the bottom of this specific table, because it will continue, of a discrepancy which is impossible. So I dare not to say it right now, but I will have to suggest that the reason offered by Badou may not be right, because we have too many possibilities of for the eponyms, the number of eponyms which are known with this month, and it seems that we will have to start to zero, and for the time being it's quite difficult to refine more the chronology that I published, as I said again, based mainly on the typology of the stamps.
That's fascinating. That's it? That's the, oh no, you have a next slide.
Right.
There's yeah, there we go.
Yes, sorry. So this is a comparison between Kadesh, Mazor, and Elita by the same periods which you've seen in the table, of course. So this has to be looked at more quietly, but as you can see, the thing that you can see by the colors is who starts earlier, who continues regularly or less regularly. So this is the first phase where you can see that you have a grouping. This is all the periods together, sorry. And you have, as I said, a grouping between 144 from 164 more or less to 144, which for the time being is the date I suggest for the end of actually all these sites except Mazor, which has a little bit earlier. So more quickly the next slide.
No, that's it.
That's it.
That was it, Gerald.
Yes, the next slide.
No, that was the last slide.
Okay, so I didn't detail. Okay, because it would be too long. So actually, it's something which is more visual than the table. That's what I have to say in short for our topic. Is I'm close to 144. I say close. It's circa. It's not. It may be between 146 and 144. And that's what I can contribute with this material.
Wow.
You like it?
I like it. All right, I don't know how the sound is going to work for us, but let's try to discuss. David Jacobson, do you have any questions? I think you might have, do we have to unmute him, or does he unmute
He can unmute
Yeah,
himself.
no, I'm fascinated. I mean, it's a clear picture that we are learning. I think it's clearer here in the sort of Judean foothills than it is in Galilee,
Can you
actually,
put the last slide?
in terms of the Maccabees and the Maccabees. Yeah, we definitely seem to see the change in the regime very clearly represented by the archaeology and by science. So thank you.
Uzi Liebner, are you still with us? Because I don't see his.
He just left.
Oh, Uzi just left. Okay. Let's see. Who do we have on here? Yuta. Yuta, are you with us? Because I don't see your picture. And I don't hear her. Who, can you scroll down the list so I can see who else is on here? Sylvie, do you have some questions, some comments, some thoughts?
Yes. First of all, I sent a note. Do we have at hand? We have a map at hand that would allow to locate all the sites.
Do we have a map with all the sites? You mean with Mazor and also Ika?
Eleka and Telkistan.
What's that?
So that we see which region we're talking about.
We don't. I'll see if I can find one and send it so that we can post it.
Now, my question was, I had a question about the pagan population. Is there a way to be more specific? Are the Phoenicians, are they, what the Greeks, Phoenicians?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Yeah, we don't know exactly who were living over there. It looked like that they're Greece. I mean, they came from Greece, but there is no specific item that we can connect to that specific place.
So, Yahiel, you don't. What do you think about the identity of these folks as compared to, for example, Tirat Yehuda at the same time period? Their material looks the same?
The material looks the same, yeah.
Well, when you say the same, you refer to the local material? Because for
The
the
local material,
yeah.
the local material in Tirat Yehuda is a very almost the same. And actually, there are a few more surface excavation around that area that were done in the last decade. I've shown them on my map. In some of them, there are a little remains of the, I would say, Hellenistic settlement that was occupied later on by the Hasmoneans. In some cases, maybe 2 or 3 from those dozen settlements, there is remains below the Hasmonean settlement of the Hellenistic one.
Yehiel, Yuta wrote a question for you. She wonders if you mentioned that there were some stone vessels found. Sylvie, this map is for you.
All right.
But let me just finish. So
Stone
Yehiel,
vessels. Yeah, we got very few stone vessels. The only one that we can actually say for clear that it looks like the usual Jewish vessels comes from S1, where was the Hasmonean fortification.
what kind of vessel was it? Was it a measuring cup? Was it a regular bowl?
Measuring cup, yeah.
It was a measuring
cup.
Oh, great. Everywhere? No,
No, there's only, no. No, I'm talking about Mazor. In Mazor, we have only one vessel that is a measuring cup, and it comes from the place where we think the Hasmonean rebuilt the site, okay? In other places, you can't say much because the Hellenistic period is very random. I mean, it's not so clear because of the rebuild of the settlement later on by the Hasmoneans, and it was still in use until the 2nd century CE, after the Maccabees, until Bar Kokhba revolt. So it was a very long use of those sites for 2 centuries or so.
Yehiel, I have a follow-up question to that, but first Paul Kosman down here in Boston has a question.
Thank you. Yeah, that was all extremely fascinating. I've got 2 questions. The first is, we've been talking about the end of all these sites, but I'm also wondering about the beginning, because Acre and Mazor seem to kick off at the end or the beginning, at the end of the 3rd century or the beginning of the 2nd century. So the question is, to what extent we might consider this a new kind of settlement or occupation of the land with a change of regime from the Ptolemies to the Seleucids. And my second question would be if there is any significance to the gap in Amphory at the time of the persecution and initial beginnings of the revolt in the last years of Antiochus IV, where we have, 4 years without any at these sites, and if that might be evidence of sort of trade disruption or something.
Donald, you can answer on that.
I can't answer because the question sort of died for me. Can someone repeat it?
Paul, you have to repeat the question for Donald, the second one.
The second question is there any significance for the absence of Amphory from 168 to 165? So the precise years of persecution and first stages of revolt.
I'm sorry, did you say 168 to 145?
6-5.
168 to 165. 3-4 years.
No, I don't believe there is any meaning to that. As I said, emperors can stay into use for a long time. I didn't qualify that, but I think there's evidence that emperors could have stayed in use for as much as 40 years. Gerald can back me up if it's rare, but you'd expect emperors to be in use for normal circumstances, a few years up to 10 years. So you can't get that kind of resolution of a gap of that short extent.
Okay.
And what was your first question?
And the first question. Sorry.
Yes?
What was that?
Yes, Paul?
Oh, and the first question about the beginning of these sites, Acre and Mazor.
Well, I can something very short. The problem is we don't have so many amphoras, and considering the relation between Rose and Ptolemy's, if there were substantial settlements of the location in the period of occupation and quite early in the occupation of the Ptolemies, we would expect much more, many more. So it's difficult to know. Now I want to take the opportunity to say that I'm quite, how can I say, disappointed by the fact that we don't, and as you know, Andrea, it's an obsession for me, we don't take into account the locals, the so-called locals, I said 11 times amphoras from this type, because we may learn if we have a very detailed study of their profile and their fabric. We may know, for example, maybe about the people who were there. And there's something that I think I can suggest is we know that as low as Pitopolis, amphora handles were found, a group that was
Gerald, hold on.
the influence of Tyre in Kadesh, for example, and other areas. The question is how Dan was there actively present? Because don't forget that all the coast of Israel was in the Persian period occupied alternatively by Tyre and Sidon, and I don't think that the coming of the Ptolemies, definitely not, and even the Seleucids, this ethnic which was very strong in trade, would move and wouldn't be anymore involved in the trade. So we have to think of Phoenicians, but of course we need steps like the one in Kadesh or other stronger proofs, and one of them being again studying the local amphora, I think.
Well, in that regard, I see, Sylvie, that you have
Can I ask one question?
I'm sorry, David, did you have a question?
Sorry. I just want to ask about the oil lamps. I saw one presented. What about those? I mean, as evidence, were more found, and with what time?
All the types that known during the Hellenistic period, the long noses and also the folded one. Actually, Renata worked on the pottery, and she made a really nice section of the book that we're working on. So everything will be published, but it's very, very
I would say local types, not more than that.
But David, is part of your
What
question,
about imported ones?
so,
I don't remember any imported one.
Really?
No.
David, when you say imported,
Thanks.
David, when you say imported, do you mean
Yes, yes.
from,
I mean, from outside the region, first of all, outside the region. And then, secondly, if they can be identified, places nearer, like, particularly, we were talking about the Phoenicians. I would be interested to know whether there are any Phoenician type monolamps found that are, clearly from, say, Tyre, Sidon, and the towns down the coast.
so I can tell you just from the one image
I
that,
don't remember any, but I can check it out later on at the paragraph that Renate wrote on the lamp. So you have my email, you can write me and I will check it out.
but I want to add that the image that you showed, Yehiel, the one lamp that you showed, that is a sort that is made in Akko and it's made in Tyre. Those are the standard lamps of the coastal cities. And I mean, it would be
Yeah, but
easy.
this is what I call local one. It's not imported from any place in the Mediterranean.
Well, yeah, right. So it's worthwhile being clear exactly what we mean when we use those words.
Okay.
Sylvie has a question about the farms, Yehiel. Do you think that they are private or located on what might be called royal land?
We thought about it a lot. I sat with Donald and we looked for a few places around in the literature sources. We can't say it for sure, but it looked like that the inhabitants, it's also, we have a question, either the owner lived over there or lived in the next by city, either Eglon or Pagai, and it was only a storage place, because after all, we have so many kinds and so much pottery sheds of vessels, of storage vessels. So we think about it a lot, but we actually we can't prove it, we can't say anything. As I showed on the slide, big site at the big farm that I have shown, surrounded by few others. I have shown on the map another 3, but actually there are another 2, which means altogether 5 small farms around that big farm. So maybe that's the owner of the whole area, and either people worked for him or were hired, and they were working the whole agriculture area in its surroundings.
Gerald?
I think if we want to know more, I'm sure that we have to look at what was going on in Egypt. And of course we have all the papyri and in the rest of the Seleucid Empire to know who was responsible for this kind of redistribution of goods after they landed in one of the areas of all these empires. That's the only way to have some sort of an idea of how that was organized. But obviously they had to live there because you had to check on them, and I don't think that workers would be enough. Considering the quantity, you have to have on the location somebody responsible administratively, or if we're talking about a private person, he would be responsible somehow. Never mind the way he was connected to the central power, but he had a responsibility for all these objects to get where they're supposed to get. Because I personally think it's a redistribution center. There are too many types to be only private. And it's a big place. I just want to get back to a question that brought you to put that map to see the spreading of the sites. I don't remember exactly because we don't have most of the sites here, or if at all. But correct me. I think we have Lisa here. So you see lot. Sorry, you can't see what I'm doing, but look at lot, not at the southeastern of Jaffa, and you may all know where Kadesh was. So only those 2 points, north and south, and then for Tel Keitan, because as I said, they have the same picture. It's south. East also of Ptolemais. What else do we have? Ika is west of the Lake of Galilee. Very close, actually. We can see it from there. So as you can see, we have a very large area, and that should be data that would help to get back to the historical part of our topic. Last remark, but I don't want to elaborate on that. I'm very surprised. I don't think it's surprising, but it's what it is. We have very few weights. Lead weights or stone weights. There are 2 stone weights in Mazor, which means that and in Kadesh I don't remember how many you have.
0.
But
0.
for the other ones, it's obvious that we were not talking about a general trade and administration of trade. It's more specifically of goods in liquid. How many, Andrea? How many weights do you have, lead and remember? I'm supposed to know, but I don't remember.
I think we have 0. And
Okay.
that's really interesting because I have read your articles on the civic weights, on the lead weights, and I wonder if they really only occur on sites with civic officials, agoranomoi.
Right. Well, if we look at the data, of course. But I would think that Kadesh, considering that there is definitely evidence with the seals of somebody who is responsible, but it could be a satrap and not necessarily with an agoranomos or an agoranomos on the site. So I don't know. Do you think it's also a trade center, Kadesh, after what you've seen?
No.
Or it's just a resident? No, it's not. Okay.
Well, I mean, the Mazor information is really interesting, especially the number of different sources of the amphoras. That's very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite different, isn't it, than Kadesh? And it's quite different than Ika.
different from Maréchal.
Yeah, but it comes from Jaffa.
Okay, Yahiel, but the Kaddish material can come from Akko.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, but it's a little bit inland.
Yeah. True. To go back to the question, Sylvie's good question about whether this is private or royal lands, and thinking what would be evidence that would allow us to choose. I wonder about that silver drinking set.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It is something unique on the one hand in Israel, but on the other hand, Sylvia showed me all over the Hellenistic world,
Yeah.
all over. So that also makes a little bit maybe a clue that it is people who came from the area of Greece.
Or anyway, are sufficiently wealthy and well connected. So not simply administrators, as Gerald has insisted. You are correct, I think, Gerald. There must have been administrators there. But, I mean, not even at Kedesh did we find something like that.
Mm-hmm. The question about the royal land, who was managing the royal land as far as trade is concerned? Trade and agriculture, of course.
In
Private people?
the Seleucid era, that's a good question. Sylvie, what do you think?
Well, Paul, what do you think?
You go first, Sylvie.
Good question.
Okay, so
The only one we have, that's it.
I'm not sure that we have at all a single monolithic model of royal land across the Seleucid Empire. I would suspect that it varies considerably depending on the pre-existing conditions they find there. And we know in many ways that Coile Syrian Phoenicia is an unusual region of the Seleucid Empire, which absorbs many of the Ptolemaic systems of rule, unlike other parts of the empire. So I would be quite cautious about suggesting what kind of model of royal land we have there, and also using evidence from elsewhere in the empire to sort of fill in the gaps.
As far as ethnies are concerned, if we look at the names in Maréchal, for example, it's obvious that certain names and patronyms are obvious translation of, what's the so-called interpretatio Graeca of local gods, which can be recognized easily. The problem is, and not only in Maréchal, but in most of this area, and I'm not including Phoenicia, Lebanon in it, although we have here and there names, I think they definitely use 90% of local person to be responsible for this kind of administration. Maurice Sartre is absolutely sure about it. The problem is we have so many Greek sounding names that, of course, it's not impossible, but we cannot prove it for all the names. So I'm personally too cautious, but that's what we have. So anyway, there were local people, Phoenicians, who were moving again. That would be an interesting thing to try to trace all the Phoenicians we can in all this area, because obviously they are the people who are strongest in the topic of trade and administration, because all the others, Judeans, Sumerian, even Idumeans and Itureans, of course, they are not really trade-oriented except locally. So I have no problem seeing Phoenicians everywhere, even if we have to prove it more strongly.
How far away are we from Yavne? There are Sidonians there.
Yes.
Around 20 kilometers.
Yeah.
And Yehiel and Donald, I have a question about the last period of occupation. So Donald, that was very interesting, the evidence of the Janaeus coins and the suggestion that in the 80s BCE, the site is abandoned. And Yehiel, you said there's occupation in the Bar Kokhba period. Is there evidence of occupation between Janaeus and Bar Kokhba?
No, what I'm saying that in the other sites, that nearby, there are some of the sites were occupied until Bar Kokhba was, but not in Mazor. Mazor, the end of the story is in the 80s, and that's it. We don't have anything later.
Except for that one stone vessel, because that stone vessel is not from the 80s. It's not that early.
Why not?
I don't think we have evidence from any place else of those vessels until the time of Herod, or even certainly the end of the 1st century BC.
You know what? I can check it once more, okay?
Okay. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah?
I would add that I stress that the Mazor material is unusual because it ends before Janaeus, the later coins appear, and it still is the only site I know in the whole country with this phenomenon. Most of the sites, even if it was intimating, continue, but maybe there was some small disruption. Janaeus was fighting a lot of people, and he was withdrawing. He was defeated right there in the center of the country. But this is unusual about Mazor, that we actually can point to a historical event that connects with the archaeological material.
What about the other side? Sorry. What about the other sites we are comparing, we're including in this topic here? Do they have Janaeus coins and as few as in Mazor, or not at all, or more?
Janaeus coins are generally characterized by a full range, including the ones that are later. And the later ones are much more complicated to discuss. I will try to summarize by saying that there's different opinions about those later coins. Were they struck under Alexander Janaeus himself, or are they imitations? And either way, those later coins continue in use because there are so many of them, but also because we find them in many contexts all the way up until the first Jewish revolt in some small quantities. So it's hard to say what's going on. It really is hard. But when you don't find them, you know something is special.
But Gerald, to speak to your specific question, and Donald can correct, but to my knowledge, not at Ika and not at Kedesh do we have Janaeus coins. But there are Janaeus coins at Shuhara. At Shuhara. Is that?
May I?
Yeah.
Don Sion recently published a book on the coin circulation in the Galilee, and he points out that that the Jewish sites, if we can call it that, are characterized by their